Dark X-Men Origin. Even if you are not a comic book fan, there is no way you have not heard about the mutant superheroes known as X-Men. Wolverine, Cyclops, Jean Grey, and Storm are just a few of the numerous superheroes who have used their genetic capabilities to help the people around them and protect them from mutants who use their powers to hurt others. But what happens when one bad guy recruits a whole group of other bad guys just to make sure his plan of hurting people goes smoothly? Sounds scary, does it not? Well, in this video, we are going to look at the evil counterpart of the X-Men team, known as the Dark X-Men. We will look into when and how it was formed and how the Dark X-Men flourished under the lead of Madelyne Pryor. So, let's get to it. Before we go into our explanation, we have a very small request. If you like our content, please support us by subscribing to our channel. This is a small click for you, but for us it means a lot. Thank you, and let's begin. Formation of Dark X-Men. By the 513th issue of Uncanny X-Men, things have changed drastically in America. Norman Osborn, the Green Goblin, was in complete power. This era is popularly known as the Dark Reign era of comic books, where the superheroes that we have come to know and love were no longer in their position of power. They were stripped of their roles, and in their place, the villains rose in power. When the Skrulls launched an infiltration on Earth, S.H.I.E.L.D. as an organization failed to save Earth. This led to Tony Stark being demoted from the top position, and instead, Norman Osborn was given complete power over the security of Earth. He got this power handover by meeting with the president, so you can understand this was not a joke. Once he got the position, Norman made Hammer, his own little S.H.I.E.L.D. copy, which he was using to rule over the people at that time. He handpicked a few people and made his own Avengers, known as the Dark Avengers. In his roster, he had Bullseye, Venom, Moonstone, Ares, and Sentry. Ares and Sentry were part of the Mighty Avengers, and the other three were chosen for their loyalty towards Norman Osborn. Now, as Tony Stark fell in the eyes of the public, he had to eventually hand over his company and all his belongings to Norman. This led to Norman putting on one of his suits and becoming the Iron Patriot. Now, while all of this was happening, Trask, the mutant hater who played a huge role in making Sentinels, came up with Proposition X. This Proposition X stated that all people with Gene X had to take chemical birth control and go through a controlled birthing process, effectively trying to control the reproductive freedom. This obviously was a hate crime, and there are no doubts about it. Understandably, owing to the hateful nature of this proposition, several people started rioting, as they should. But this just led to more and more problems to arise. See, by this time, Cyclops was deemed to be a bad guy who was unable to control the mutants. That is, the actual X-Men under his command. This led to him becoming the fugitive of the law. With Proposition X being pushed forward and the riots breaking out, the Iron Patriot was not too happy about everything that was happening. So Norman decided that the best call to make would be to ask Emma Frost to help him with dealing with the mutants. See, Norman did not want to interfere with the mutants in the first place because of the whole M-Day event, but when the riots started breaking out, he had to take a step as the Iron Patriot. As Norman and Emma had a secret deal, and Emma was sorta bound to him because of it, she was the best candidate for it. When Norman asked Emma to be the one to deal with the mutants, she was delighted to do the work for it. The Dark X-Men roster had Mimic, better known as Calvin Rankin, can adapt to the powers of nearby X-Men. Tandy Bowen, as Dagger, is the one who can create energy blades and has healing abilities. Cloak, or Ty Johnson, who is the group's teleporter because he can travel through dimensions. Dakin Akihiro, the son of Logan, as Wolverine. Michael Pointer as Omega, who can absorb energy. And Raven Darkholme, better known as Mystique, pretending to be Professor X. Now, with such a star-studded roster, there had to be someone significant to lead the team. Emma Frost agreed to Norman's proposition of leading the team as long as Namor, the ruler of Atlantis, was added to the roster as well. Now, Mystique was not going to fight in the battles because Norman needed her to pretend to be Professor X for PR purposes. So, without her, the rest of the team was introduced to the public in a grand introduction to prove that the Iron Patriot was taking all of the problems and allegations that would jeopardize the safety of the citizens very seriously. Emma took the mantle and informed the crowd about an indefinite curfew from sunset to sunrise for civilians and mutants alike because she wanted to fish out Scott Summers. When Scott heard about it, it all made sense to him. If he and all the X-Men stay hidden, abiding by the curfew and the law, then they would never be able to prove the crimes that Norman committed. If they do not follow the rules and do end up going out, they will end up getting captured and sent to the Omega Machine. Now, While Emma and Norman insisted that whichever mutant they had captured or would be capturing was going to be dealt with humanely, that was a lie. A big and fat one at that. Turns out, by getting Beast from Earth-297, Norman and Emma had made a machine called the Omega Machine in Alcatraz. While they claim that what they are doing is humane, it is not. This Omega Machine drained the powers of the mutant who was put into it, and the Beast from this timeline was put through it, while Professor X helplessly sat in a cell, knowing what fate would befall him. While all of this was happening under the surface, Emma and her team looked really great on the surface. Scott and his gang basically had to sit far away from the whole team and keep an eye on the Dark X-Men to figure out how they would be able to stop them. The first time we see the Dark X-Men in action is when there is a group of rogue mutants who decide to break the curfew because they want Emma Frost and her team to show up and arrest them. The Dark X-Men showed their true caliber when they showed up and neutralized the threat in record time. The second time we see the Dark X-Men in action is when Trask lets out his group of Sentinels in the Northern Park. These were originally humans whom Trask had transferred into the Bio-Sentinels with some sort of mutation, which is the ultimate form of bigotry if you ask me. The Dark X-Men took care of the Bio-Sentinels issue, and while they were doing so, they did not know they had an audience. Scott, who knew a lot of things were at stake, decided to stalk the Dark X-Men with his team to study them and their fighting style so that when his team went against the Dark X-Men, they had a fighting chance. And sure enough, the observation helped them a lot. It turns out that there are a lot of issues between the group mates. Cloak and Dagger did not want to be a part of the team. Dagger especially. She wanted to run away, while Cloak did not want to live out a life of fugitives running from the law. Scott had been observing everything from a distance, and while he and his team had to admit that the team Norman had was quite powerful, it wouldn't be impossible to beat them because they did not have the power of friendship on their side. Scott's team cared about one another and fought together like a team, while Norman's team did not, and that would have been the easiest way to win the fight against them. While this may seem very silly, the whole power of friendship jargon actually turned out to be truer than we thought it would be. It turns out that Emma and Namor were double agents who were in Norman's team with one goal: to dismantle the system completely from the inside. When the Dark X-Men and actual X-Men finally faced off, with the two agents double-crossing their team, the Dark X-Men fell. This led to the X-Men gaining their victory and leaving San Francisco to go to their island Utopia, with Dagger and Cloak along with them. Dagger and Cloak were the only ones to accept the offer that Emma gave them to join the actual X-Men team after they lost the fight. On the other hand, there was a little town where people were falling into some sort of a trance that made them think they were the X-Men, when they were not. The Dark X-Men members who did not betray Osborn were sent to investigate, and there they witnessed the rebirth of the X-Man, Nate Gray, who was not too pleased to learn about how corrupt the whole society had become in his absence. Nate went to face off against Osborn, and after the fight that ensued, it was really unclear if the Dark X-Men team existed or not. Daken was seen participating in future endeavors of Osborn, but as a part of his Dark Avengers team. With that, we see the end of Osborn's Dark X-Men team. Madelyne Pryor's Dark X-Men. In the 2023 Dark X-Men story, we learn about Madelyne Pryor and her current life as the head of the Limbo Embassy. For those of you who do not know, Madelyne Pryor is a clone of Jean Grey who was made by Mr. Sinister for his plans. However, the clone did not show any signs of life until a part of the Phoenix Force entered the body after Jean Grey rejected it. This led Madelyne to become who she is. She married Scott Summers, and while she wanted a life that was happy and simple, there were things brewing that were not in her control. Soon enough, she had to come face to face with the fact that she was not a person and that she was made a broodmare for Mr. Sinister. This realization crushed her heart, and it got worse when Scott left her alone after realizing Jean was alive. This led Madelyne to turn to the dark side, making deals with the two demons, Sim and Nastir, and ending up becoming the ruler of Limbo. Eventually, she fell in love with Alex Summers, better known as Havoc. Havoc followed Maddie wherever she went, every step of the way. Now that she is the ruler of Limbo, she does have a better grasp of life, better than what she used to have, but that does not mean her life is all good. As luck would have it, she is struggling with a lot of things. As she is the ruler of Limbo, which is hell, there are a lot of humans who are not happy with it. Her house acts as a sanctuary for all the mutants who are considered to be misfits in Krakoa and have shifted to her place. This led to even more people showing up at her doorstep with placards to let her know that she was not welcome. However, as Alex Summers mentioned, no matter how much the Orcus tried, the US government was protecting the sovereignty of Limbo Limbo, so no matter what happened outside, Alex and Maddie should focus on survival. However, Maddie knew that there was no survival in peace as long as Orchis was out there trying to get rid of the mutants. She had heard Jean's anguished scream when Professor X's copy removed so many telepaths in Genosha, so this time Maddie decided to do what was right. She used her portal and reached her Mercy Crown. It was a Cerebro that was made out of a skeleton and looked more like a demon version of Cerebro than anything else. While Alex did not want Maddie to do anything hastily, Maddie made it obvious that she was going to reach out to all the mutants who were out there and give them safety instead of providing them with a safe space after they reach her place. When Carmen, a young girl, was captured and relocated to the Orchis concentration camps, she was rescued by Gambit, Archangel, and Maggot. Carmen, better known as Gimmick, is a mutant herself, and her girlfriend's father was the one who informed the authorities. However, when she is saved by the trio, they realize exactly what they are up against because the Orchis have an android Wolverine. This Wolverine attacked Archangel, and right when all hopes were lost, Madeline and her Dark X-Men showed up. With Azazel, Havoc, Emplate, and Zero, Maddie formed a new X-Men group. Her X-Men were ruthless, and while they subdued the whole Orchis group, they were forced to leave Archangel behind, whose healing factor had not kicked in quite yet. So Archangel was captured and taken by the Orchis officials to their hideout with a huge secret. As it turns out, even though Krakoa has its gates open for any willing participant, there were quite a few mutants who did not like the stifling nature of the Krakoan Council, so instead they found a safe haven in the Limbo Embassy. On the other hand, Maddie was busy trying to get every demon to join hands with her, by hook or by crook, and she was not opposed to using Havoc's love for her to get the job done. There are a lot of worlds in the Marvel Universe, and each one has its own Madeline Pryor. They barely lead a simple life, and some of them ascend to power. One such Madeline Pryor became extremely delved into the magics of the Limbo. This certainly affected her, as dark magics often take a toll on the user. When she faced the X-Men of her timeline and failed, she was cast deeper into the abyss of the Limbo. Orchis' research unit somehow stumbled across this Madeline Pryor, who had completely transformed herself into the Goblin Queen and was barely recognizable. She had wings, she had horns, she had hoofs for legs, and there was no resemblance to the Maddie we knew. This was the big secret that the Orchis research unit was hiding with them. While Madeline was trying to fix Alex, who was bleeding out, the Goblin Queen was trying to fix the fallen Archangel after disemboweling the delivery boy. The Goblin Queen was working with Agent Kroll and Agent Valance, who were independent contractors of Orchis, and they were working on getting a cure for X-Gene by using the Goblin Queen's powers and mixing it with an elixir from Otherworld. While the Goblin Queen brought the Archangel back to life, he was no longer the same Gambit, and Maggot had to deal with that while they tried to save Callisto. Maddie fought against animals that looked awfully like xenomorphs as she tried to get Marisol Guerra to come with them. However, Marisol refused and Maddie decided to retreat. The Goblin Queen, who had been sending the Archangel and the animals on the Orchis' commands, decided to attack Chasm next, better known as Benjamin Riley. The Goblin Queen used the mutant abyss, which can stretch their skin and take someone into a different dimension, and got Madeline and the Dark X-Men away. While she was gone, Goblin Queen attacked the whole of the Limbo Embassy along with Kroll and Valance to get to Benjamin. However, Benjamin was not interested in this fight at all and went back to his captivity voluntarily. So, Goblin Queen targeted Carmen. Azazel, who was the father of Abyss, killed Abyss and got the Dark X-Men out, forcing the two versions of Pryor to face off against one another. The Mercy Crown that Madeline used could reach out to the souls of the mutants, and the Goblin Queen wanted it to reach out to mutants and seize their souls so that no one could betray her again. Madeline may not have lived through alternate realities, but Goblin Queen had, and she knew that Madeline Pryor was meant to suffer in all timelines. The fight between the two Madeline Pryors was far more mental than physical. The Goblin Queen enticed Madeline to join her, to wage war with her instead of against her, to protect themselves from the betrayal that would have happened anyway. Madeline even reached out and grabbed her hand, but right before things could be concluded, Feint took the form of Madeline. Taking that form, she begs Madeline to remember who she is and who she used to be, and to not fall for this scheme. This served as a good enough distraction, and Madeline was able to cut through the Goblin Queen with her scepter. With that done, Madeline realized the error of her ways. Instead of being a leader of the Dark X-Men, she focused on the sanctuary that the Limbo Embassy provided. She let go of Feint and Gambit, allowing them to join the X-Men while she maintained her position as the ruler of Limbo. With the the acceptance that she is not meant to be the leader, Madeline ends her team of Dark X-Men, focusing on being a ruler instead. But something about the way she claimed herself to be the true Goblin Queen is enough to make anyone wonder if Madeline is truly herself, or if she ended up taking some parts of the Goblin Queen when they held hands. Marvelous verdict. Over the years, we saw two different types of Dark X-Men. The 1963 version was an evil counterpart of X-Men, while the 2023 version was more like the quote from Wreck-It Ralph: "You are a bad guy, but that does not mean you are a bad guy." Madeline's team was made up of misfits and typically bad guys, but they showed up and did their best to do the right thing, even if their leader Madeline had initial ideas that were quite harmful. So tell us, which Dark X-Men do you like the most and why? Personally, I like the dynamic of Madeline's team much more, as it shows off the complexities she and her teammates faced while they dealt with the issues at hand. And if you liked our content, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to us if you haven't already. Have a good one and be safe. Thanks everyone.